Okay, I'm teaching this lesson in my classroom after school's over. For some reason, when I went to upload today's video during class, it was only like 9 minutes long, and I know I spoke for like 20 minutes. So it just stopped. I don't know why it stopped recording, but we're gonna give it another shot. So we are doing the midpoint formula. So what I'm gonna do is put a little line right here. All right. It's not really a line, it's a line segment because I got an endpoint to this. You can't have a midpoint of a line because a line keeps on going forever. So there's really no place that's in the middle. I guess everywhere would be in the middle if you think about it, but that's not for today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click on this line and it puts a little blue dot right there. It tells me where the middle is. So right there is the middle of that particular line. When I talk about the midpoint basically means it's the same distance from the midpoint to each of the endpoints. So from here to here is the same distance as it is from here to here, from the middle to the endpoint. That's what the midpoint basically is. But how do you find the midpoint? The example that we used in class was on a highway, and you see the road markers, the mileage markers, okay? And let's say you were over here at mile 5, and I think I used 5 and 11 today. I can't remember, but let's say you're at mile 5 and you wanted to meet somebody, but you wanted to meet somebody in the middle, at the midpoint, the halfway point, okay, between the two. You didn't want to drive the whole distance, and you decided, hey, let's just meet in the middle. We both can drive the same amount of distance. So that's what the midpoint is. We want to find out, where is that point. So what mile marker? If I'm at 5 and my friend's at 11, what mile marker are we going to meet at if we're going to be in the middle? So you could do this. Like somebody said, well, let's do this. Find the whole entire distance, okay, from 5 to 11. So 11 minus 5 is 6. So this whole distance right here, the whole length would be 6. So if I drove from mile marker 5 to 11, I would have to drive 6 miles. Well, my friend at mile 11 wouldn't have to drive at all. All right, so that's good, but we wanted to meet in the middle. So where is the middle? So if the whole distance is 6, this little distance right there is 3, and this little distance right there is 3. Okay, so from here to here, that's what the 3 is, just indicates how far it is from here to here. That still hasn't told me what mile marker I should be at. I'm not at mile marker 6, I'm not at mile marker 3, so how in the world do I know what mile marker right there is? Well, if I start at mile marker 5 and I actually drive 3 miles, so 5 plus 3 is what? 8. So my friend starts at 11 and he goes 3 miles in this direction. You're actually going to the lower numbers, so you have to subtract. So 11 minus 3 is also 8. So that's one way of getting 8. But that's kind of a long way about it. All right, there's a little bit of an easier way to do it. So I've got two numbers. I've got 5 and I've got 11, and I want to do something, maybe a couple steps, maybe one step, maybe 2 steps, but I want to do something to those two numbers in order to get to my midpoint, which is mile marker 8. So what can I do to 5 and 11 to get 8? Well, if I subtract them, I get a 6. That doesn't give me 8. If I add them, I get a 16. That doesn't give me 8. But let's think about this. If I added them together, I get 16. But how do I get from 16 to 8? Well, I can just divide it by 2. Why did I know to divide it by 2? Because we're splitting this up into 2 equal parts. And it makes sense that you divide it by 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to add. That's the key. When we did distance formula, when I found that 6, I subtracted. I went 11 minus 5, which is 6. But this time, I'm going to find the midpoint. So this time, I actually add the two numbers together, and then I divide by 2. So that's how you can find 8. And that's going to be part of our little formula. We're going to have a midpoint formula. Well, the same thing would hold true if this line was up and down or vertical. All right, so if you had a point right here and a point right here, it even works if it was negative. Let's do that. We didn't do this in class, but let's do it now. What if I had like a -3 and up here we were at 5? So if I was at, I know you don't have negative mile markers, but let's pretend, okay, we're at -3 on the mile marker, and we're at 5 on the mile marker. Where in the world is the middle? Well, let's put a little dot to indicate the middle. I don't know why that makes that line squiggly. It's kind of weird. Anyway, there we go. So how in the world do we find the middle? Well, we just, let me get the right marker here. What we do is we add the two endpoints, so 5 plus negative 3, and then you divide by 2. Let's see what we get. 5 plus negative 3 is the same as 5 minus 3, which is 2. Divide that by 2, and that gives us 1. What does that mean? Does that mean the length of this is 1? No, it means that the point, the location of this point is at 1. It's at 1 unit, all right? So if you take a look at it, does that make sense? Is this halfway? Well, how far is it from 1 to 5? Well, it's 4, isn't it? How far is it from 1 to negative 3? Well, 1 minus negative 3 is also 4. So that puts us right in the middle. This length is 4. This length is 4. Remember what midpoint means? It means it's the distance that you're the same distance from the two endpoints. So I'm 4 away from 5, and I'm 4 away from negative 3. So that is my midpoint. So if we can do a midpoint horizontally and we can do a midpoint vertically, that brings us to the next thing. If you had something like this, let's draw like an X and Y axis here. So here's a Y axis, here's an X axis, and let's move that up just a little bit. All right, and let's do a different color. Let's do this color right here. All right. Oops, I want a line. There we go. So I'm going to draw a line. Let's just keep it in the first quadrant, make everything positive, make it kind of easy. So let's say from there to there. All right, so there's a line. I don't want to find the distance of the line. What I want to do is I want to find out where the midpoint is. So here's my two endpoints. So where do you think the midpoint is? Well, again, with this program, I can just click on it and see that blue dot right there. That tells me where my midpoint is. All right, so I'm going to draw a little midpoint. I don't know why that goes away. It did that earlier in class. Let me try something. There we go. So that's the midpoint right there. So that's where it's located. But what I want to do is I want to come up with a formula to figure out where or how to get to that midpoint. Well, if you think about it, if I start here and let's just draw the line. Let's do it right now. So if I start here and draw a line right under there, okay, and then I'm going to take a line here and pop it up to here. So I made a right triangle out of it, which is kind of nice. We dealt with right triangles when we did the distance formula. But this is not distance formula, okay? The reason I did this is because I want to find the midpoint of this horizontal line, and then I want to find the midpoint of this vertical line. And what that's going to do, if I go halfway and then halfway, it's going to put me right at the midpoint of my diagonal line on that red line right there. All right, so that's what I want to do. I want to find the midpoint of this line, and I want to find the midpoint of this line. And if I take that up to here and I take this over there, it's going to give me the midpoint of the red line. So what I'm going to do is put some, let's call this x1, and let's call this point right here x2. These just represent a point, like mile marker 3, mile marker 11, or whatever I use, 5 and 11, okay? Pretend that's 5 and pretend that's 11, all right? And the same thing here. I'm going to call this, and it doesn't matter really which one you call what. I'll show you why in a second. So that's y1. We'll call this y2. I could have called this y1 and that y2. It doesn't really make any difference. So what I want to do is come up with a formula to find the midpoint of that red line. Well, what did we do for the midpoint of the horizontal line? Well, we took the two x's, right? Remember that 5 and 11? We took those two numbers, we added them up, we divided by 2. So from here to here, I would go x1 plus x2 and divide it by 2. So that's how we find this point right there. Well, the x-coordinate of this point on the red line is going to be the same as this x-coordinate right there. So that gives me the x part of it because I want to find an ordered pair. I want to find the midpoint. It's a point. It's not a distance. It's not a length, right? It's a point. So it's going to be an ordered pair. What about the y's? How do I find how tall, or not how tall, but how do I find the midpoint of this vertical line right here. How do I find that midpoint? Well, I take the two endpoints, I add them up and divide it by 2. What are my two endpoints? Well, this point is a y1. This point right here is a y2. So what do I do with those? I go y1 plus y2, and then I divide that by 2. Now remember, that's going to give us a point. So this thing right here is going to give us the x part of the point, and this stuff right here is going to give us the y part of this point, and that's all I got to do. And it's a point. It's an ordered pair, so let's make it look like an ordered pair. I'll put a comma in between, and I'll put that stuff in parentheses. And that's basically the midpoint formula. Not basically. It's exactly the midpoint formula. So if you wanted to put it in a box, right, just to kind of make it stand out a little bit, so you know that that is the midpoint formula. There it is. Remember, it's not just equal to a number. It's a midpoint. Point. That's an ordered pair. So your answer for midpoint is always going to be an ordered pair. Don't put a number. Don't put the midpoint is 5 or the midpoint is 17. The midpoint is -4. No, it's an ordered pair. Okay, so make sure that you understand that it is a parentheses and a comma in between. All right, I hope that makes sense. That's how we got the midpoint formula. So hopefully you saw how we got the midpoint formula, and you're not saying, well, it's just somebody sat there and just made something up. No, they didn't make it up. We came up with it on our own from stuff that we already knew about midpoints. So we're almost finished. I'm going to do example 4. So example 4, I'm not going to write it all out. You could look in the book if you wanted to, but it says find the midpoint of the line segment from -5, 5. So let's write that down. -5, 5 to 3, 1. The nice thing about this is you don't have to graph it. Like if you wanted to, right? You could graph the thing. You could go -5. So -5, 5 would be about, let's see, about right there. And then 3, 1 would be about right there. You connect them and you want to find the midpoint. Where were we finding the midpoint? The midpoint would be about right there. That was a sloppy little graph, but you get the idea. You could do that if you wanted to, but we already know how to do the midpoint formula. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time we want to do the midpoint formula. So let's go ahead and use our little formula that we developed, and let's write it down since we don't see it. So midpoint is a point. Remember, it's an ordered pair. And then how do you get the x parts? You just add up the two x endpoints and divide by 2. How do you get the y? You add up the two y's and you divide by 2. These are the x's right there, and these two are the y's. Pretty simple, actually. So let's do it. Let's add up the x's. So it's -5 plus 3. Those are the two x values. Don't add these two together. I've seen kids do that. Use the x's. -5 is the x, 3 is the x. So you add them up and you divide by 2. Remember, this is an ordered pair. And then how do you find the y's? Add those up and divide by 2. So it's a 5 plus 1. Divide that by 2. Let's see what we get. -5 plus 3 is -2 over 2. And 5 plus 1 is 6 over 2. Always simplify it. Always, always. -1, 3. And that is the midpoint. So if you drew a line, we did that a second ago. I erased it, but I did it really sloppy. But if you were to do it on a nice graph paper or something, you could plot those points and kind of get an idea where it is, but this tells you exactly where it is. There's no doubt in the world that that is your midpoint. That's it. Let's see. Let me see what the homework was. All you guys were in class anyway, except for just one. I think we only had one missing today. So you already saw this stuff. So I doubt anybody's even watching this. If you're watching this, as they say on YouTube, like it, subscribe, leave a comment below. All right. Be nice to know that somebody's watching this. So this is, so here's your homework. And it's section 2.1 and it's part 2. All right. So it's part 2 and it's page 161, and we are doing 35 to 44. Notice I stuck an even one in there because we are doing all of them. Okay? So that's your homework. Hopefully this thing recorded. I'll see you in a second, and we'll stick it up on YouTube. All right, have a good one. See ya.